So yeah, I guess just kick things off. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your career path. I saw that you went to your undergraduate school in San Francisco, where I'm from, and then you did a master's in global entrepreneurship at Babson, and then you started EDAP after you had graduated from Babson. So maybe you want to tell us what was your career path, or what was your upbringing, and what kind of inspired you to start EDAP?
Sure. So originally from the Middle East, born and raised in Bahrain. It's a small island, just about 1 million people. And yeah, I got accepted to move to the US for undergrad. So I moved to San Francisco. This was back in 2006. Stayed there until 2010. And I think that experience was a real pivotal part of my life, because every other friend that I had met at university was dropping out to join a startup, or was a co-founder of a startup, right? So I immediately realized you could be a student, you could be broke, but you could have this audacious, ambitious goal to build $1 million, $100 million, $1 billion startup, right? And it was possible. Like, some of the friends managed to raise funding and drop out of school and do that. So, right from a very young age, I was like, anybody could do anything. But I felt like my time in San Francisco didn't really equip me with the pedigree to really, understand what I was getting myself into. So I, went online and looked for the best school to try to teach me how to do that. And Babson was, arguably the #1, university in entrepreneurship. So applied, got in. I did a program for 1 year as a master's in global entrepreneurship. So the program took place in Babson and in France and in China. Actually, we got to live 4 months in each country. And the sort of the lateral part of the program was in Babson. Graduated, and then decided thereafter to, and at the same time, I'd met, some of the recruiters from Google, and I was going through a process of interviewing and going through the process at Google. And then I, decided, I should just, jump in head first, try to do this startup thing, like immediately out of school. So I moved to France, actually. At the time, France was offering visas for anybody who wanted to start a company, sponsored by the university that I was in, or part of the program with Babson. So applied, got in, moved to France, spent about 2 years in France, to try to start a company, in a country that I didn't speak the language, so I didn't speak French. Had a very limited network at the time, but it was, throwing yourself in the deep end is quite fascinating. What you could do to try to survive, So it's like try to learn as much as I can while I was out there. The startup lasted about 1 year and 8 months. Failed, obviously, but learned so much. Right, learned a lot about products, MVPs, getting into incubators, etc. And then I moved back to Bahrain, where I was from, and with that sort of Babson pedigree and having been through a startup for about 2 years, I started meeting sort of the the VC ecosystem here in the region, and then sort of ventured into EDAP. And by 2014, 2015, launched EDAP, and yeah, been doing that ever since.
Awesome, that's great. So now you've lived in the Middle East, in US, and in France. What would you say? What would you say is your favorite of the three, or what makes each one, or what makes one of them more special?
It's a very good question. I think every territory and geography in the world has its pros and cons. Sure. I'd say. The US taught me a lot. Taught me that in the American dream, anything's possible. You can start at a young age. There's no ceiling, right? It's just how eager you are to be successful. And I'd say the US really sort of ingrained that throughout that experience. I think the Middle East for me is home, and is quite rich in terms of resources, access to capital, obviously due to, oil and what that's caused to the region. I think, young folks who would like to venture into the startup space, there is capital, right? You just need to be able to position yourself to present an idea and to raise funding. Like, capital is abundant, so I'd say that's definitely a pro for the region. Europe, I'd say, is very tough. Like Europe, and that's a positive thing. Like, it's a very concentrated, highly competitive ecosystem. So you wouldn't make it if you weren't working 10x harder than your competitor or various other organizations. So I think that's one thing that Europe taught me, is that you got to work hard, right? You got to wake up, commit the hours, and there's light at the end of the tunnel if you do end up working really hard. And I guess that advantage carries over in multiple places. But I felt like the competitive landscape in Europe definitely helped me sort of work a little harder, and that's been very beneficial sort of after that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to know, you were in the U.S. from 2006 to 2010. Any learnings from being in the U.S. like through the 2008 crash, similar to the one that we're kind of encountering now? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, I was a student, right? That was a junior year university, 2008. That was like my second year of school. So to be honest, I had very little exposure into what was really going on. The main advantage is that like things were a lot easier back then, I'd say. Like my sister moved to San Francisco in 2014. About 8 years after I had moved there, and she had a very different experience, right? So when I was there, the rent was a lot cheaper. The city was a lot more accessible, and especially during the 2008 crash, like the city was a lot easier to live in compared to maybe somebody who moved there, mid 2014, 15. The landscape and just the economic situation was a lot different. So I wouldn't want to comment further because I wasn't an entrepreneur then, right? I was just a student. I was a broke student in university, and just being broke was easier during the crash just because things were cheaper.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Sure. So, Nezar, maybe tell us a bit more about EatApp now. It's a restaurant reservation platform, an online booking engine. But to our, to the common viewer or listener, how is your platform unique or different to competitors like an OpenTable or a Resy?
Sounds good. So one of the things you want to sort of, within our space, it's a very region-specific game, right? It's a marketplace business. So you want to focus on a territory. You want to be able to acquire as much inventory in that territory. You want to be able to offload that inventory into a marketplace, and the marketplace that has, the best restaurants, the best timings, the most availability for the best tables, ultimately is the winner, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a very territory-based game, right? So yeah. I'd say that we do not compete with OpenTable because we are effectively the OpenTable of the Middle East.
Yes.
But then we did numerous things that I would say are different and are doing things that are different now. But yeah, so sort of OpenTable is sort of North America, in the UK, Germany, Japan, Australia, and various other markets, but mostly North America. Our game is the region, right? So we service the Middle East and the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. Having said that, one of the things that we found sort of later down in the journey is that the software that we build for restaurants. So the model is, by the way, two-sided model, right? On the one side, we have software, and we sell this software into restaurants. And that software helps restaurants manage customers, manage their tables, manage their staff, etc. But most importantly, it looks at the inventory of that restaurant i.e. the tables. And then it gives us the opportunity to operate the second business where we could sell those tables online, right? So we sell those tables online on our own website and our own apps, but also we power bookings for TripAdvisor, for Google, for Resy here in the Middle East, American Express, and about 30 other partners, all sort of funneled into our software. So it's really a two-sided thing. But on the software end, one of the sort of findings we had is a lot of the operational requirements for operators, restaurant owners, here in the Middle East are almost identical to ones that are based in London, based in New York, based in Sydney, Tokyo, etc. And so as we began to continue to invest in our software locally, we began to see a lot more adoption of our software globally. And actually, we rank number 1, number 2, or number 3, depending on the geography and territory that you're in SEO. If you were to just Google, restaurant reservation software, typically EatApp would appear, result 1, 2, or 3 in almost every location globally. So we see a lot of demand for the software, inbound demand, about 500 restaurants a month almost that register with us to try the software. So I guess that's one differentiator, is that we decided to sort of move into the self-serve type of model where, restaurants would be able to find us online, they would be able to sign up. It's plug and play, right? It's super easy to use. And that's really helped us sort of ramp up beyond the region. So we now service, restaurants in about 30 countries via this inbound model. So maybe that's one of the differentiators between us and the classic sort of open table model, which is very territory based.
Right. And I was just looking at your website. One of the things you guys were advertising as a main differentiator is you believe the restaurant should own the guest experience and own the customer. Can you describe maybe what makes EatApp's privacy policy particularly special and important in that restaurants actually own the guest experience?
Yeah, so this is part of a much larger theme, which is, the dynamics of the internet's changing, right? Because folks, 5 to 10 years ago, operators, offline retail operators, had very little understanding of the internet, basically, and relied on marketplace businesses to help them acquire customers. And that's been predominantly the model since, the dot-com boom, all the way to just a couple of years ago, right? So the internet's had its 25 years of sort of educational ramp up for most operators. And so marketplace businesses profited from that, right? So the likes of the food delivery players, OpenTable, and several others, really owning the customer regardless of the channel online, and then charging a commission to the operator. What we started to see recently is operators getting smarter, right? They're younger, so they come from a lot more savvy sort of technological background. They understand the internet. So if tomorrow you wanted to start a business, you would be very, the way that you would start a restaurant business would be very different from, say, your grandfather, right? Sure. It's just time is evolving the ability for people to leverage the internet for success. So on the point that you asked, we're trying to assist the modern restaurant. The modern restaurant is operated by predominantly, a younger generation, business operators that understand the internet, and giving you the tools so that you could succeed online, right? So we see a lot. We see the theme of direct to consumer, so B to B to C, outpacing B to C, right? So if we can equip the restaurant with the tools so that you can become more successful online, then we become an enabler business versus a marketplace business. It's very, very different models. And if we become an enabler business, then we can focus on servicing the restaurant, and then the restaurant can focus on servicing the guest, which is one of the sort of underlying hospitality foundations, right? So that's sort of the theme, right? So we partnered with Google so that we can give the restaurant the ability to acquire users on Google. We partnered with Resy and American Express to give them the ability for them to acquire users through that. So we give you the ability to acquire customers directly. It's sort of the direct to consumer, D2C as they now refer to it. And it's really sort of overpowering the sort of B2C model that is slowly getting weakened. The marketplace models is getting challenged more and more as we move forward. So we decided to take a proactive approach and really think about how can we help restaurants, connect directly with consumers and be successful.
Yeah,
another
that's
one
excellent.
point I want to ask about was on your website, you mentioned also venturing into the content space. EDAP has a pretty robust blog, right, on their website. So can you talk a little bit about the impact that you've seen content marketing on your business and the growth of EDAP?
Yeah, I mean, I think content is, amongst various other factors, but content is king, right? Because content is how you are found on the internet, right? So we've partnered with a lot of thought leaders in the hospitality space to talk about subjects that matter the most to these operators, right? How does a restaurant succeed in a post-COVID world? How does a restaurant design a menu or a menu mix or menu engineering? A lot of this content is high in popularity in terms of search. The amount of hospitality operators that are searching for the stuff online, enabled us to sort of present EDAP as a thought leader. So, here's other thought leaders. They're all sort of on the EDAP platform. This is what they're saying. And the strategy is you bring thought leaders to your site, maybe one time you'll just read this blog. The second time you'll read another blog. We're like, hey, this is the same brand that I discovered before. What do they do, right? And then you discover some of the services that we do, and then you sign up, right? So that's been predominantly the strategy, is to really focus on inbound, right? You build the content, you become a thought leader, people come to you, they trust you, and potentially may want to do business with you, right? So that's been the thinking behind that strategy.
Yeah, excellent. I also wanted to ask Nazar, EDAP was now started, I think, about 5 years ago, if that's correct. To this date, what would you say has been both A, your biggest accomplishment that you guys are most proud of, and then B, what's been the biggest challenge or obstacle that you've had to face in that period?
It's a good question. One of the things we're most proud of, looking back, so we've had several maybe key accomplishments, right? So we raised just over $7 million. We service over 1,000 restaurants or hotel groups or food and beverage hospitality brands. So about 1,000 customers in our portfolio. And so those are the results that we're proud of, but those have been driven predominantly and solely due to the team, right? The team that is grinding day in, day out, and I owe it to those guys that have worked tirelessly throughout these past couple of years to really get us to where we are today. And obviously, some of the accomplishments are due to some sort of advice, right? So you need to hire the best people. Without the people, you're going to move a lot slower. And two, you got to have supportive, investors that are strategic and are willing to back the business when the business needs it the most, right? And so I think we've been very fortunate to be able to have investors that came in, right when we needed it the most, to be able to support us, to help us grow. So I'd say those are sort of the achievements and why we were able to get there. In terms of challenges, man, there's so many. But I guess maybe the most difficult thing, or maybe the challenge that I can think of that surfaces to the top is really to try to balance, focus. To really think about focus for the business, right? Like it's constantly an ever evolving thing, right? So at one stage in the business, you got to focus on your MVP, right? That's early days. And it's very hard to get distracted in the early days and try to want to do more things or try to, deviate away from the plan, right? So to stay focused on that one metric that matters, right? Your North Star metric, and executing and delivering on time, and then constantly evolving that focus is a very, very tricky thing. And it's almost an art, right? What you focus on today is very different what you focused on, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And the ability for you to constantly evolve the focus, continuously move the needle towards that sort of end goal based on where you stand in the business and your current stage. I'd say that's definitely, probably one of the hardest things, right? And that's why businesses go bust, by the way. It's not because the market wasn't there for the taking, or, the competitive landscape was too extreme. Those are certainly some of the things, or they may not have gotten funding. Definitely those are some of the sort of repeat reasons why businesses fail. But I really think it's due to focus, right? It's like you have limited resources, limited time, right? What is the single most important thing for you to achieve in order to maximize the probability for you to enter the next milestone or the next stage, right? And being able to do that while running a business, while fundraising, while dealing with competitors and all the other crazy things that happen, that's definitely a challenge. And it continues to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something that's really relevant, that running a business can be very distracting, right? Because of all the things that you have getting kind of thrown at you every day. Do you have any personal habits that you keep to kind of help yourself maintain that focus and kind of like keep, have a positive impact on you while you're kind of running your business and growing it?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's playbooks for this stuff, and we didn't reinvent the wheel, but we religiously stuck to playbooks. And I do playbooks for almost everything that I try to do. But the playbook that we implemented at EDAP was the OKRs framework, right? Setting objectives and then the key results. I would say we started that slightly later in our journey. So it was a little more hacky and messy prior to that. But we now commit religiously to OKRs, right? So we define company-wide objectives and results. And then those sort of waterfall down into the different departments and then the different stakeholders or employees in those departments. So at any time, waking up every single day, like I am working on this one thing because that ultimately feeds into the company objective, right? And we have, we commit to the cadence of doing these OKRs, never missing those OKRs. And we do monthly check-ins to ensure that the whole company is aligned on the one thing that we need to achieve, right? And you can check out OKRs. There's a lot of content online on why they're useful. And then so on a personal note though, so I'll know my OKRs, right? And what I'm responsible of doing. And then what I'll do is a thing I learned from engineering, which is sprint planning, right? So I have a weekly sprint that I plan so we start the week Sunday to Thursday, unlike the US and the Western world where it's Monday to Friday. So ours is Sunday to Thursday. So my Sunday morning, I'll wake up a little earlier. I'll go to my desk station. Now we work from home. About an hour earlier to be able to just take the time to really sprint plan, right? What are the single most important things I need to achieve this week? I document them on a software called 15Five, which has been phenomenal. I highly recommend it for any entrepreneur or startup looking to implement OKRs and also sort of employee sort of task planning for the week. So I do that. I sprint plan for the week. I document all the sort of results and tasks that I want to achieve for the week. And that, 15Five dashboard's open all week. I have 3 monitors. One monitor is just my 15Five. So at all times, I ensure that I am keeping track of exactly the tasks and objectives that I need to get done throughout the week. Now, you asked me, you get distracted, right? Midweek, I receive a call from a shareholder. He asks for a report, or that's not a good example, but a big customer wants to churn, or a lot of things do happen, right? Scary things that happen. And so, I'll always leave a slice of my calendar open to be able to accommodate sort of unplanned things. And that'll be there in my weekly sort of sprint planning. like I'll leave a little time to do that. Otherwise, if it's not critical, if the business is not going to die, if I don't address this, then I'll always have a I'll write down the things that I would want to accomplish, and then it'll just be rolled into the next week, right? So I'll just document them, and then when I do my sprint planning next week, I'll look at all the stuff that came up. I'll just plan them for the week if they qualify to be there. Very, very important stuff. Like, it's very easy to get distracted with a lot of things that are going on. We found that OKRs and sprint planning, not just for engineering, right? Sprint planning for every other department too. That really helps us stay organized.
Yeah, thank you for that. Definitely some good tips in there. I was wondering, when I was looking at the reservation management space, I saw that there's a lot of different pricing models out there right now. Some companies have tiered pricing. Some guys just have one monthly fee, and then others do a commission based. Do you think in the future, do you think the industry will kind of find itself an industry standard where there's one predominant pricing model shared throughout all the companies, or do you think it's going to continue to be different and based case by case by each company?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and I want to relate back to the discussion we had about the direct to consumer topic. So I think the commission heavy model that is being challenged aggressively. You have new players like Resy, 7 Rooms, Talk. Those are some of the sort of players that have been able to enter the US market and begin to acquire market share away from OpenTable. And so OpenTable then has revised their pricing model. What previously they used to charge, for like the booking widget on the restaurant's website, they used to charge about 25 cents a cover for that. That's no longer happening. And then they've also reduced the per cover charge. So I think ultimately, if I think 5 to 10 years down the line, I think what you'll find is there'll be a price point for software, and that category, it'll be on the lower end for your casual dining restaurants, and significantly on the higher end for your mass market casual dining, and then more so for the fine dining space, right? So because the requirements of those businesses, they require enterprise grade software. Some of them, the single site restaurant requires robust analytics, user roles and permissions, etc. Stuff that you'll find in enterprise software typically. So I think that price point's going to continue to skew on the higher end, and then on the lower end for the sort of casual restaurants. That's on the SaaS model, and then on the sort of B2C model, the commission model. I do think the marketplace businesses will continue to exist. This whole kind of online shopping model, shopping mall model, I think will continue to exist because some consumers prefer to go to platforms like OpenTable to discover restaurants and book, right? And restaurants will always seek more customers, right? So I think the commission model will work as long as the marketplace business does contribute incremental revenue to the restaurant, right? So if I was to disconnect from this one marketplace, have I lost customers? If yes, then I think those restaurants will subscribe to the marketplace businesses to be able to yield incremental revenue. I think what's going to be challenged is sort of the direct to consumers, the tools that are currently available, like the widgets on Instagram, the reserve with Google page or functionality. Those types of technologies are going to just be free and part of the software. I think that's what's going to happen in our space. Like direct to consumer is just going to be part of SaaS. And then if you have a marketplace business and you own the consumer, then you can start charging a commission for that. So, I see and the space has been slowly moving there, a lot faster on some other, spaces like travel and food delivery. That's, heavily being challenged right now. But yeah, I think that's ultimately what's going to happen from a pricing standpoint.
Thank you. Got it. Another thing I was wondering is, we talked about this, but EDAP, you guys are constantly putting out new features and new tools, both for on the diner side, on the restaurant side, and then both for the customer, the person who's using the app on the other side. Is there any cool features or new technologies that you guys are working on that you think is really going to put EDAP over the top? Anything in particular that you want to share with us?
Sure. Yeah, I think, so some of the stuff that you'll find on our website, we're definitely focused on the post-COVID world. So we're building a lot of tech around contactless dining, helping restaurants do direct-to-consumer for takeaway, curbside pickup, delivery, etc. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but there's definitely been one theme that's been really exciting in our space, and that's to introduce automation and AI actually in the restaurant space. Because one of the things that we found clearly been happening, a lot of the restaurants have been using SaaS, right? They've been using the tools, they've been recording every single customer, every walk-in, every waitlist customer, every phone reservation, online reservation. And they do take the time to keep the CRM in good hygiene. Like they will tag customers, etc. The problem is that restaurants, unlike startups, we believe they fail to convert data, very valuable data, into actionable insights and therefore revenue, right? So that they're accumulating this wealth of data, but they're failing to action that data and experiment with the data to bring customers through the door, right? So I think the biggest theme for us is we spent the first 5 years working together with restaurants to be able to operate just like the rest, like to give them the tools so that we can truly understand their problems and to give them the tooling to become more successful. And now that's sort of changing, right? We're trying to help restaurants become more like EDAP. Like we're a startup and we're heavily data driven. Like most of our decisions come from data. Like we look at the data and this is why we decide to build a certain feature or why we decide to go after a certain customer, etc. Right? So it's now we're almost trying to change that mindset of the restaurants to help them go from data to action that data and generate more revenue. So sort of the announcement, it's not something we've launched yet. It's definitely in development internally at the moment, but it's introducing AI, right? So really to do this on behalf of the restaurants, right? So the restaurant's going to use the software. The software is going to say, hey, I noticed that John has been to the restaurant multiple times, but then he stopped coming, right? The guy stopped coming to the restaurant. We'll be able to flag that customer and be able to sort of initiate some drip funnels and some messaging to try to bring back that customer to the restaurant. Some of the normal stuff app developers do and internet-based companies do, we're trying to bring that offline to the restaurant world and to try to really help them leverage this data and the CRM that they have to be able to bring back customers. That's just one example. And we've been going even further down the funnel to really learn about behaviors. Like, some restaurants are like, hey, can you tell us the customers that come to the restaurant one time and the customers that come to the restaurant multiple times? Like, what's the difference between those two? What causes a customer to come back? And so we start digging into the data and we realize that certain waiters in the restaurant result in better retention. Certain dishes in the restaurant, like if a customer comes to the restaurant for the first time and orders a Bloody Mary, they have a 30% higher chance of coming back to the restaurant, right? Like, so we're introducing AI to be able to dig deep into the data, to be able to surface some actionable insights, and then automate those insights, right? And what I mean by automate, like we will automatically tag a booking and recommend that they order a Bloody Mary and make sure that the hostess communicates that to the waiter so that the waiter can recommend that to the customer. And then we'll be able to track that. Okay, did an increase in sales in Bloody Marys result in an increase in retention, right? That type of stuff is super exciting. And like, we want to be the first company in our space in the world to be able to introduce some of this AI stuff. And to see if we can help restaurants, leverage this data to increase revenue. If we can help them increase revenue, I think we're doing a pretty good job doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Those are
that's
some
really
really
remarkable.
cool and exciting stuff.
Do you, in light of, congrats on your recent raise, in light of this and this initiative that you're kind of working on in the background or kind of like developing, is there a link there? Like, do you plan on maybe allocating some funds for hires that could help you build out this initiative, or is it still in kind of like the development phase before you guys fully commit to it?
Oh man, so if I was to tell you like our hiring pipeline and our hiring targets for the year, sort of after the raise, we were pretty bullish on scaling the company.
Hmm.
You know, I think if you compare like Q4 of 19 compared to Q4 of 20, we're supposed to almost double the headcount internally, but then COVID happened, right? And so we went from full speed on the throttle to try to grow the business to immediately being on the front line of COVID, right? We're in the hospitality space, right? So if there was one business line or airlines being shut down, hotels being shut down, restaurants being shut down, meant that our revenue went from whatever it was in February to 0 in April, right? Never have I imagined that that would ever happen. So we're truly in crisis mode at the moment. And also, unlike the U.S., you guys have furlough programs. In Western Europe, you have programs that help pay salaries. We don't have that here, right? So we've been responsible to pay our employees with 0 revenue, right? So it's the narrative has changed. Instead of thinking about hiring resources, internally we're trying to protect as many jobs as we can, and that's been obviously priority one. But then how could we enable the internal resources that we have to produce more, right? And so this project, as an example, is taking up resources that typically would be busy doing other things. So we sort of internalized and shifted resources to accommodate continuing the cadence of developing great products, while keeping headcount the same. I'm pretty proud that we didn't fire a third of our company, unlike other companies, etc. We decided all hands on deck. We're all in this together, and we're gonna make it through. We should develop now, and we should strengthen our product line so that by the end of the funnel, or the end of the tunnel, excuse me, once things sort of come back, we can come out of this stronger with the tools and technology to be successful again.
No, like, is there any like major lessons you've learned as kind of like a founder and a CEO on the best way to manage or management skills, or maybe some like pillars of value and culture that you have emphasized to your team during this time?
I mean, absolutely. I think, so first of all, I've never been in this situation before, ever. Never have I, experienced explosive growth followed by a cliff-like decline in terms of revenue and transactions and signups, etc. So this was all new to me. Certainly I took the time as early as I could to try to learn sort of best practices. Again, playbooks, right? I mentioned this stuff a little early. And some of the things that really were important during this period was, one of our values is ownership, right? At EDAP. So whatever product or project or task that you work on, you assume full ownership. And we try to empower everyone at EDAP during this time to exponentially focus on the ownership component of so we had like major VP hires that we were supposed to hire now, considering COVID wouldn't have happened, and instead, since we froze hiring, we sort of gave ownership of some of those roles and internalized and sort of shifted resources to do that. So giving people the ownership and trust that they could take on bigger projects and do bigger things, I think that's been definitely one of the key takeaways, and seeing that people are capable, right, to be able to do those things. And two, I think this is sort of generic advice, but you know, during times of crisis, I think the single most important thing is transparency, right? What we used to have, you know, monthly check-ins across, like all hands check-ins, and of course we have weekly meetings between different teams and one-on-ones, etc. We made it mandatory that we check in with everyone in the company once a week. So by the end of the week, at like 4 p.m. on Thursdays, so is the last day of the week, with an all hands, where we step in and every department you know, steps in and talks about their key accomplishments of the week. And we give, obviously, we open up the discussion to give, you know, very high level updates on the industry, on transactions, on restaurants, on how things are still normalizing or getting worse. So we've been very, very transparent since the beginning, and we've, you know, committed to doing it every week. It's been, I don't know, 17 or 18 times now that we've done this. We've been in lockdown since early March, so almost you know, 3-4 months. But yeah, and being transparent, I think it also you know, reduces anxiety, right? People are like, the world is burning, like what the hell's going on, and they get concerned, right? So the more transparent you are, the more you expose and you trust that people will take this information and translate that into something productive. You know, that's certainly been very helpful. So I'd say maybe just two things, right? Transparency and then ownership and trust have definitely been two things that have been
Absolutely.
theme, I guess, during COVID.
Definitely great advice for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. I have to ask you, I'm just curious. So I'm a first generation American. My parents immigrated from Iran. I always wondered, what is it like doing business in the Middle East? Do you face any more or less challenges than when you were starting a business in France, or if you were to start a business in the US or elsewhere in the West?
For sure, right? 100%. It's just, yeah, I mean, it's the context of doing business is very different, right? In the Middle East. But I will also say that within the Middle East, it's very different in a place like Dubai compared to a place like Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Lebanon, right? I'd say Dubai is probably the closest to what a sort of the Western business context looks like, just because decision makers here are from the US or the UK or various other geographies of the world, right? And so it's a very multinational, dynamic sort of business landscape. So certainly in the UAE, you know, you follow sort of best practices as you've been trained in Babson. That would definitely apply here in the UAE. Having said that, doing business in Saudi, very different, right? So then you'd have to sort of mold and adapt to sort of the Middle Eastern way of doing business, and that's a lot more relationship building. It's a lot friendlier. It's a very sensitive way of doing business compared to the ruthless, you know, time-sensitive context in the UAE, right? Like people here, you have a meeting, cut the crap, get down to business. We only have this many hours. Let's get through this. Saudi, Bahrain, Lebanon, very different, right? It's a lot more relationship building. It's a lot more laid back. They do business with people they like. And so it's a very important skill set to be able to adapt accordingly, right? So we have investors from Saudi, we have investors from Silicon Valley, right? Like our discussions with 500 startups are you know, the investor from Silicon Valley. Like that discussion is very, very different from our, you know, VC investors in Saudi, right? Like almost, you know, so certainly there's context to be learned in the different places you do business. Yeah. It's very fun too to be part of that. Does that answer your question at all? Or?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. I'm sure you've been exposed to, I guess, both sides of the culture, with the Western culture and the way it works there, and then the Middle Eastern culture, which is much different. So you've seen it all for sure.
Yeah, I also lived in China, right? I saw the sort of Asian part of it, and I saw the European, and then the Middle Eastern. But yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I'll say this, right? Like, I think the purchasing behavior, like the consumer behavior, is changing very, very fast, right? And faster in other geographies, but also it's changing here, right? And the fact that the internet today provides democracy almost, right? Like I can find out any piece of information about any company. I can find out their pricing. Like all the stuff you talked about during this interview, right? As content producers, like there is democracy now because now it's an equal playing field. Like anyone else has access to the same data, right? Information. So I know the context is very different, the way you do business, but ultimately, you know, the consumer behavior and the way that people begin to collect data and information is becoming democratized around the world. So people who want to do business with us in Saudi and the ones that want to do business with us in New York, ultimately, you know, all check out our website. They know our features, they know our prices, etc. So, you know, it almost creates an equal playing field. You know, and that's happening to every business, I'd say. And if a business isn't available, if their content's not available online, like there's a massive opportunity that they're not penetrating.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ramir, do you have any questions? I just have one more, so I'll give it to you if you have any others.
Nothing off the top of my head. I think that, yeah. No, yeah. I think definitely answered a lot of the questions that I had.
Great. Yeah, the last question I had, Nazar, is what do you do when you're not working on the business? What do you like to do in your free time and when you're away from work?
Man, let me think. So, I mean, I try to do playbook stuff that's you know been, you know, sort of you know, best in class ways to keep your mind focused. So, you know, during my off hours, I will you know, work out as much as I can. I try to do that at least, you know, 4 to 5 times a week. I'll read. I'll make sure I'm active. You know, I produce music or just, you know, a DJ. You know, try to spark my creative you know, abilities. I'm also involved in like a festival that we do here in the Middle East. I've been a Burning Man. I don't know if you guys heard of Burning Man or not. I've been a Burning Man now 6 years in a row. Unfortunately, it won't happen this year because it got canceled. But try to, you know, learn as much as I can, or try to bring as much as I can from that experience over to the region through a sort of a creative festival that we do. So I spend a bit of time doing that. Yeah, so yeah, music, festivals, sports, water sports, reading, you know, engaging with friends, yeah, that type of stuff. But I gotta say, like, you know, work is my life, right? And I think, like, I enjoy it, right? So, like, even on weekends, I'll take the time to start thinking about things. I'll go on walks with colleagues to talk and brainstorm about ideas for work. The minute that the sort of work has been, once there's like a marriage of like your passion and what you do, I think that is where you're able to tap into this like deeper layer of productivity and success. And so, you know, as much as I do all these other things, like EDAP is my life, right? Like that's what I do all the time. I think about it. I dream about it sometimes, as freaky as that sounds. But it's great because it's like what I want to do. It's like my passion, right? So yeah, so that's, hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nazar. Again, we really appreciate the time. We'll let you go. We know it's getting late there. But thank you again. We love learning more about the company and are really excited to see you guys expand and grow. It's definitely an exciting story. Cheers. Thanks so much, guys. And I appreciate, you know, keeping the alumni network active and reaching out. Really appreciate it. Take care, guys, and best of luck.
Take it easy. Thank you.
Good night.
Later. Bye.